Lucy yawned as she lay on her sofa reading Sonia's last published novel and jotting down areas she felt Sonia needed to work on. She took off her glasses and walked over to her refrigerator to find something to chew on, but remembered she had nothing yet. She was yet to stock her house, and she doubted she would be able to do that until weekend. She suddenly realized she had had nothing to eat all day when her stomach rumbled. She had been about leaving for lunch earlier when her boss had shown up in her office to show her her official car and driver. After that she had been too surprised to remember her hunger, and had later buried herself with work until he came to tell her it was getting late. She knew without doubt that if she didn't get something to eat now, she would be at a risk of severe ulcer pains, and that she wouldn't be able to bear. She had to get something to eat, and also get some medicine in case the ulcer pain came, as she knew it would when she finally eats. She didn't really know anywhere around the neighborhood yet, since she was yet to move around. She had spent the first night at that mansion with Tom, and then yesterday she had eaten the apple cobbler Tom had brought as a good welcoming neighbor. Unfortunately, he seemed like the only good neighbor in the neighborhood since nobody else had been over to say hello. Or maybe they had come while she was away at work. She would never know. She stood up and walked over to her closet to get something comfortable she could wear. She picked up a gray-colored sweatpant and an equally gray-colored hoodie since the weather was sort of cold outside, and then she walked over to her dressing table and packed her hair in a ponytail before putting on her glasses. She looked at her appearance in the mirror and noticed her face was completely plain, although her face was almost always plain apart from the powder and lip gloss she often used. But it was extra plain now since she had showered and was ready to go to bed. Who cares, she asked herself as she headed for the door, and on second thought returned to apply a touch of lip gloss on her lips. Of course I'm not doing this to impress anyone, I just don't want to look too plain, she assured herself as she strolled out of her house with her wallet and locked the door behind her. Before walking over to the apartment next door, she stopped by the door and couldn't help wondering why she had decided to come there. She had tried not to think of their little exchange in the car earlier, but standing here now, she wondered why he hadn't come over after claiming he was going to bring her out of her shell. What are you doing standing here like this? Why not just go and buy what you want? A voice in her head asked, interrupting. He thought, first of all, I'm not familiar with the neighborhood and so I need someone who is. To accompany me. She mentally responded. So what if it was a different person that lived next door and not him? The voice asked again to her frustration. It's just not safe for a lady to go out all by herself when it's dark in an environment she isn't familiar with. My safety is paramount to me. Lucy mentally responded again, excuses. That's why you applied the lip gloss, the voice accused. Fine. I will go alone. Lucy responded in irritation, but just then the door opened and she came face to face with Tom, who looked surprised to see her standing in front of his door. Lucy felt her cheeks burn in embarrassment at being caught like this, and she cleared her throat when he only raised a brow. I need to go out, okay? He asked, wondering what that had to do with him. I haven't eaten all day, so I need to get food and also medicine for ulcer. She explained nervously, although he was glad she was here. But he was already trying to be everything a gentleman wasn't. Okay? Tom asked again, wondering what it had to do with him. Okay, what? She asked in confusion. What is stopping you from going where you need to go? Is the car not coming on? He asked as he walked out and shut the door behind him. Looking at him now, his outfit showed he was on his way out. He was wearing a three-quarter short and a polo shirt, and a baseball cap covered his short mop of black hair. I was sort of hoping you could take me there? She said, making it sound like an explanation and a question at the same time. Of course there was no way he could turn her down, right? First of all, it's past work hours. I'm not your driver until 7 a.m. He said, sounding flippant, and Lucy couldn't help wondering if he had multiple personalities. Why was he sounding so cold all of a sudden? Or was he still mad about earlier? She thought they were past that now. She swallowed. I wasn't asking you as my driver. I'm asking as a neighbor. She offered with a small smile. I see. Unfortunately, as you can see, I have plans. Her smile wavered. Oh. Sorry for being a bother. Tom couldn't help feeling guilty. Why not just order for something with your phone? That's what everyone does these days. He suggested, sure. I will do that. Thanks. She said without looking at him as she turned to leave. She was just going to walk around the neighborhood and get acquainted with it now so she wouldn't need him or anyone else to accompany her next time. Tom stood there with a frown on his face as he watched her leave. She had offered for them to be friends earlier and he had accepted, so his attitude was uncalled for. Friends could ask their friends to accompany them somewhere. He could be a bad boy and a friend to her at the same time, right? That shouldn't be very difficult, he decided. Wait up. He called out, and she turned to look at him as he hurried up to her. I think I could spare a few minutes. Let's get you what you want and then I will be on my way. Tom said with an easy smile, making her decide he had multiple personalities. Neither Tom nor Lucy said a word as Tom drove the car out of the garage and down the street. He had no idea where he was driving to since he wasn't very familiar with the environment, so he just kept his eyes on the road so he wouldn't miss either a pharmacy shop or a grocery store. So why haven't you eaten all day? Tom asked, trying to break the silence in the car. I got carried away with work at the office. Only just realized now that I was yet to even have anything apart from coffee, Lucy explained, grateful that he was talking now. She couldn't deny that the silence had made her very uncomfortable and nervous. Have you always had such a poor eating habit, or is it because you're new here and at the job? He asked with disapproval. She didn't know why she was stung by the disapproval, or was it criticism she heard in his voice? She was tempted to respond rudely, but had to control her quick temper. Certainly you must have forgotten to eat at some point too while working, haven't you? She asked, turning to look at him. Sure he had. But then he was a businessman building an empire, and that was normal. He had people working for him whose duty was to make sure he didn't forget to eat, so he always had his meal whenever he was supposed to eat. But she, on the other hand, was just an employee, and inasmuch as he appreciated the effort she was putting into the job, he felt she was overworking herself. I work for myself so I can afford to do that. But you're doing too much harm to your body while working for someone else. Tom pointed out. Yeah, right. You wouldn't be complaining had you been the owner of the company. Lucy countered. And what makes you think your boss wouldn't complain about this if he finds out one of his staff was living like you with such an unhealthy eating habit? He asked, turning to spare her a glance. Even my boss at my former branch, who isn't the owner of the company, loved how I put everything into my job. So I'm sure the owner of the company would be even more impressed. But I don't expect you to understand that, since you don't own your own company, and you're a blue-collar worker for that matter. So maybe we should have this conversation again after you've established your own successful company. Lucy said with a stiff smile. She knew that was low even for her, but that was what he deserved for being so critical of her eating habit. Ouch. That hurts. Tom exclaimed with an amused glint in his eyes that she couldn't see. It seemed like she was very sensitive to criticism, and she had a quick temper. Very nice. You don't seem to be very familiar with the area, Lucy observed, changing the subject since she had said her piece. That's because I hardly come out here to get things. I have whatever I need delivered to me, or I travel out for outside jobs, he explained easily. Including food? She asked. Since she could guess he wasn't the type to cook, he gave a nod as he answered, including food, right there. She exclaimed, pointing at a pharmacy ahead of them. Tom found a spot to park the car. You can go get what you need, and then I will drop you off at home once you're done. He suggested, and she got out of the car quickly. She knew he still had to go to wherever he had been headed before she sought his help, so she needed to hurry. Tom took out his phone and dialed Harry's line. I'm sorry I'm running late. Something came up, he explained immediately. Harry received the call. I thought as much. I suppose your beautiful workaholic neighbor came up? Harry asked in a teasing tone. They always met once a week outside work environment to just drink and have fun. Just give me 30 minutes and I will join you. Remind me when I come that I want to discuss something important concerning the well-being of the staff at the company. Tom said, and hung up immediately. He saw Lucy hurrying out of the pharmacy with a paper bag in hand. I hope I didn't keep you waiting for too long? Lucy asked as she got into the car. You didn't show this much concern about keeping me waiting at work. Or sorry, I forgot I was your driver then, and now I'm just your neighbor. Tom said, wanting to see her response. Well, the Bible did say love your neighbor as yourself. Nothing was written there concerning drivers. Lucy retorted, making him chuckle. She also had a good sense of humor. The day wasn't wasted after all. He had learned a couple things about her sooner than he expected. We should find a grocery shop. No. I'd hate to take up any more of your time, so I got snacks. Maybe tomorrow I will do that whole delivery stuff you spoke about, or maybe I could just go grocery shopping during lunch break. She assured him, and he just looked at her for a while before giving a brief nod. Immediately he parked the car in front of the house. He handed her the car key, but she quickly declined. You should go out in it so you meet up with your date. There is no point in leaving it parked here while you wait for a cab. Thanks for your help. Good night. Enjoy your date. She added with a wave as she headed for her apartment, leaving him staring at her. Date? Was she thinking he was going out to meet with a lady? If he remembered correctly, he had only said he has plans. When did plans become synonymous with date? He was tempted to call her back and correct the impression, but decided against it. Good girls liked bad boys. He felt so irritated or ill-tempered as he felt right now as he sat by his penthouse balcony, with a glass of whiskey in his hand while he just looked ahead of him. They had returned from Hedden after his shoot earlier that day, so he was back to his home in Sogol, another part of the country. He couldn't understand why Sonia had disappeared without a trace, without even giving him a chance to end things officially. He couldn't believe the number of congratulatory calls he had received already from most of his colleagues in the industry. A crazy fan had gone ahead to upload the engagement photo on the comment section of his fan page, and by the time they arrived at the airport, they had met some of his fans who were upset, protesting at the airport, while some others stood there bearing congratulatory gifts. How was he supposed to get out of this mess without her? He couldn't even step out of his house at the moment because journalists were gathered at the front of his house waiting to see him and ask questions about his engagement and supposed scandal with Sophia. He rubbed his hand over his face and gritted his teeth in annoyance when his phone started ringing again. If he so much as laid his eyes on Sonia, he was going to strangle the life out of her for putting him in such a difficult position. He picked up his phone, ready to snap at the next person to congratulate him, and groaned when he realized it was Jade, his baby sister. It was difficult lying to her because she was like a human lie detector. How she managed to always spot a lie, be it in person or over the phone, was still a mystery to him. He contemplated ignoring the call, but decided to just talk to her and get it over with, so he accepted it. Hey? Why don't sound like a man who just got engaged to the love of his life, as the gossip articles say? She asked as he knew she would. I'm just exhausted. It's been a long week, and an even longer day, so shouldn't my soon-to-be sister-in-law be massaging you or something? Jade asked in amusement. She isn't here. I already traveled back to Sogol. She lives and works in Hedden, and couldn't leave her job. Cut the crap, Brian. We both know that's bullshit. Tell me what's honestly up with you and why you did something like that, Jade said, cutting him off. Something like what? What is so wrong in wanting to settle down? Brian asked with a scowl. That's something someone like Tom does, and I won't be surprised. Not someone like you. Last time we spoke you weren't even ready to have a serious girlfriend, so how come you flew from being the mingling single not wanting a committed relationship to being the lover boy who suddenly wants forever? Jade asked in a tone he suspected she used a lot in the courtroom. Well, things change. P-E-O-P-I-E change. Brian insisted, to the best of my knowledge P-E-O-P-I-E, like you don't change so easily. Anyway, I can see you're bent on carrying on with the lie. I will let you be and get back to work. Jade said in a resigned tone. You're always so busy with work. Don't you ever do anything else? Brian asked with a worried frown. Maybe I will do other things after I start my own law firm. I'm counting on you and Tom as my first major clients. No boyfriend yet? Brian asked curiously. Nope, still mourning Todd? He asked even though he knew she probably was going to deny it. I don't have time to think about anything outside work, she said with a sharp edge in her voice which told him it was still very much a sore subject. Take things easy on yourself. I love you too. Good night. Jade said before disconnecting the call. Done with the call now, Brian thought about what Jade had said about people like him being unable to change easily, and he remembered Sonia saying he was shallow. Am I really shallow? He wondered, sitting down across from Harry at the lounge bar. Tom nursed a glass of wine as he listened to his friend talk about the stock market and cryptocurrency. By the way, what was it you said you wanted to tell me about the staff? Harry asked, changing the subject. First of all, I want all the offices closed and the building shut down once it is closing hours. And no one is permitted to take any paperwork home. Tom said, making Harry raise a brow. Why? I don't want them overworking themselves when I'm not. Harry looked like he was going to argue, but he gave a nod. I will do that tomorrow, thanks. Also, I'm thinking about providing lunch for the staff in all the branches. Tom explained, we are already doing that. Isn't that why there is a canteen where they can easily get their free lunch? Harry pointed out, I forgot about that. Okay then, just have someone go around the offices tomorrow and find out the number of those who might be interested in having their lunch delivered directly to them. Tom explained, why do I feel like this about your neighbor? Or maybe I should call her your boss? Harry asked, narrowing his eyes at him suspiciously. Can you just do as I asked? No. Everyone is going to figure out something is off since most of the staff are already aware that they can easily order their preferred meal up to their office. The only person who doesn't know this is obviously you and your boss, really? Tom asked curiously. He had never really been interested in how his staff spent their lunch hour, so he had no idea they usually had their food delivered to them. Yes. So you can make the suggestion to her, or if you want to soften her up even faster, you can become her lunch delivery man. Harry suggested with a grin, you think that would soften her up? I'm trying to be a bad boy. And I don't want to ruin it, bad boy? Harry asked with a slightly raised brow, wondering what had come over his friend. Yeah. Jade says good girls like bad boys, so I'm taking the bad boy approach. Tom explained, you mean your younger sister Jade? You told her about this madness and she actually supported you and is even giving you tips on how to go about it? Harry asked with a shake of his head, yeah. I don't see why not. Well, you could be a bad boy lunch delivery man then. How about I get you hair dye, earrings and nose rings to suit the title? Harry asked sarcastically, and then one look at Tom's thoughtful expression he shook his head, no. Don't even think about it. I was just kidding, but it was too late. Tom was smiling already with a determined look in his eyes. I don't think that would look bad on me. For crying out loud, you're 30 years old, not 18. Harry reminded him in alarm when he saw Tom considering his offer. Well, since I spent my teenage years being a genius and trying to make money, I can as well spend this time living like a teenager. Thanks for the suggestion, I think I'm going to try that out. Tom said with a grin, tapping his friend's back lightly. He was going to get a bad boy makeover. Lucy was surprised to see Tom already standing by the car the next morning. He had his left hand in his pocket, while leaning on the car with the right side of his body, and his right elbow was resting on top of the car. Seeing the way he was standing by the car, one would assume that he was the owner of the car, Lucy thought dryly. She noticed he was smiling and followed his gaze to see what was giving him so much pleasure, and sighed when she noticed two young girls who looked like they were in their late teens, smiling flirtatiously and using a sprinkler to wet their tops, making their crop tops transparent enough to reveal their well-defined boobs. How typical, Tom winked at the girls. And turned around when he heard someone sigh, "Good morning, ma'am." He greeted with a polite bow and straightened himself as she approached the car. That was when Lucy noticed what he was wearing. He was wearing a white floral print short-sleeve button-down shirt tucked into a gray-colored pant with a black belt and shoe to go with it. But it wasn't just his choice of clothes that got her attention, rather it was the fact that he had left about 3 or so of the top buttons of his shirt undone, revealing a bit of his chest which was just as hairy as his exposed arms. Did she notice his hairy chest that night? Did she touch it? She was a sucker for hairy men. And though she had never really had anything to do with anyone, she loved reading about them and seeing them on movies. Tom noticed her eyes were fixed on his chest and suppressed the urge to smile. Ahem. He cleared his throat as he moved closer to her and extended his hand to take her handbag. Lucy flashed him an awkward smile, pretending like she had been lost in thought as she tried to recall if he had said anything. As he got closer to her, she perceived the scent of his cologne. It was really masculine and distracting. Not very strong, but strong enough to make her want to bury her nose on his chest and sniff his body like a dog. "Good morning, ma'am. May I have your bag?" Tom repeated when he noticed she still seemed lost. "Get a hold on yourself, Lucy." She chided herself as she mentally shook her head to get rid of those unreasonable thoughts. "Sorry, did you say something?" "I zoned out thinking about an article I'm working on," she said with a forced smile. Tom looked at her with an amused smile but simply nodded. "It's fine, ma'am. I asked if I may have your bag. Lucy is fine, and you don't have to worry about my bag." "I got it, thank you," she said as she walked over to the car and got into the back seat and attached her seatbelt. She had planned on riding in the front with him today, but seeing as he was dressed, and his chest was distracting her, she didn't want to sit in front with him and have to keep staring at him as she knew she would. "I hope you had a good night rest?" Tom asked as he got into the car, looking at her through the rearview mirror. "Yes, I did. How did your date go? I hope she wasn't too mad at you for showing up late?" Lucy asked as she wound down the window before taking out her phone from her handbag, and then she busied herself by checking her mails and messages. She was really cool, Tom assured her as he drove off, and waited for more questions about his date, but when he heard nothing, he looked through the rearview mirror and noticed that Lucy was already busy with her phone. "Nice," Lucy muttered after some time. But Tom wasn't sure if she was saying that in response to what he had said or to what she had seen on her phone, so he decided to mind his business since it was obvious they were in work mode right now. And there was no need acting too friendly with his boss. The rest of the drive to the office was silent until he drove into the company's parking lot, and then he cleared his throat to get her attention before she could get down. "I was thinking, what would you like to have for lunch? I could have it delivered to your office during lunchtime. That way you don't have to skip lunch because you're too busy," Tom suggested. "That isn't part of your job description," she pointed out. "I never said it was. I just don't want to have to be work extra time, past work hours again like last night. And don't worry, I learned the company offers free lunch to the staff, so I'm not spending money I don't have. I'm only going to bring it to you since I'm your driver and have nothing doing at that time," Tom said in a cool tone which made her feel like he was angry over helping her the previous evening. "If this is about last night, I can assure you that you don't have to worry. I won't disturb you ever again," she promised. "Miss Perry, I said Lucy is fine." "Yes, you did, sorry. So what did you say I am getting you for lunch? Or would you rather I get you anything I think is nice?" Tom asked as though every other thing she had said since he asked the question was irrelevant and out of point. "I just said, don't worry about it," Lucy said with a hint of irritation in her voice as she got out of the car and started heading for the building. "I will get a bit of everything then," Tom called after her, and chuckled when she turned around to glare at him before she disappeared. "So cute and stubborn," Tom murmured to himself with a grin. Lucy tapped her pen on her desk impatiently as she tried to figure out what was bothering her and why she was unable to focus on the work in front of her. Thankfully, she didn't have to try too hard. The answer jumped at her: Tom. Of course it had to be Tom, and her reaction to his scent and exposed chest. Now that she knew the problem, she had to figure out why she had reacted that way to him, as well as why she was feeling so unsettled by her reaction to him. This was of course the curse of an overthinker. Even though Lucy knew she had a thing for hairy guys, she was hardly one to get carried away when looking at one in real life. She had been to the beach on a few occasions and had seen hairy guys, but never had she ogled at them that way, or been caught staring. So why was this different? Because he had been standing very close to her? Maybe. And maybe she had felt like sniffing his body too because she liked people who smelt good generally, so it definitely wasn't really about Tom, or was it? She wondered with a sigh. Maybe it was, since even though she liked Pop smelling nice, she had never really thought of sniffing anyone like a dog before now. Perhaps she had reacted that way with Tom and not with others because she didn't know them, the way she knew Tom. Like she knew him in the biblical sense of the word. She hadn't slept with the others, but she had slept with Tom. And that made all the difference. That had to explain why she kept wondering what it must have felt like running her hands over his hairy chest, or how he must have smelt like as they lay together on the bed. Why couldn't she remember other details of their night apart from him eating her honeypot? You can't be thinking of the right now. You shouldn't be thinking of it, she reminded herself desperately. Why? Why did he have to be my neighbor and my driver? Lucy groaned out loud in frustration as she rested her head on her desk. She sat up when she remembered how he had threatened to bring lunch, and narrowed her eyes. Maybe she could ask Mr. Harry to give her a different driver? She could ask them not to fire him. But instead just give her someone else, or even offer to drive herself around. That would be a win-win for them both, since she was sure he wouldn't be very comfortable with the idea of being her driver anyway. Having come to that decision, she stood up and straightened her blazers as she walked out of her office. She stopped by the desk of her secretary, Amy. Right, yes, the young lady said with a pleased smile, glad that Lucy had remembered her name. How can I get to Mr. Harry's office? Amy looked at her, wondering if she should tell her staff was not usually allowed to go to the president's floor, but then again, directors usually went there, and Lucy was a director. Do you want to submit something? I could take it to the receptionist and have someone deliver it to him at once. She offered as she quickly stood up, but Lucy shook her head. I need to speak to him about something, and I don't want to talk over the phone, she added, knowing that Amy might suggest she give him a call. It's on the left wing of the 7th floor, the second to last office, Amy said with a polite smile, and Lucy thanked her before heading for the elevator. Now that she had this plan to get rid of him as her driver, she would need to come up with a plan to get rid of him as her neighbor too, she thought as she got into the elevator. For the time being she would endure living next to him and avoid running into him as much as she could, until she could find someone else who would possibly be willing to swap houses with her. That was possible, right? She thought as the elevator stopped and she stepped out of it. Following the description Amy had given her, she stopped in front of Harry's office. There was a tag on the door, Vice Chairman Harry Jonas. Before she could lift her hand to knock on the door, a door opened. It was the door to the last office, which she suspected belonged to the president. Harry stepped out of the office. Immediately he saw her standing in front of his door. He raised a finger asking her to hold on, and then returned inside the office. She is standing in front of my office, Harry told Tom. By she I suppose you mean Lucy? Tom asked, looking at him with a slightly raised brow. Yes, so why are you still standing in my office when you should be attending to her? Leave. I'm busy. Tom said before returning his head attention to his laptop. Would you like to listen in on the conversation? Harry offered. I wouldn't mind the noise. And don't forget to tell her about the new rule concerning closing hours, Tom reminded him. Harry gave a nod before returning to join her. Good morning, Miss Perry. Sorry about that, I just remembered something I needed to tell the CEO. Harry explained as he approached her, making Lucy wonder why he was explaining to her. It's not a problem, sir. Good morning, sir, Lucy greeted politely. Come with me, Harry said as he walked into his office. And Lucy followed him. Lucy greeted Harry's secretary as she walked past her desk. Have a seat, and tell me what brings you all the way here, Harry said, looking at her curiously as he sat down behind his desk and picked up his phone. He dialed Tom's number, and as usual Tom received the call and placed his phone on mute, so there would be no sound from his end. Lucy wished he would give her a moment to look around his office and admire the decor, but quickly reminded herself that she was here for more important business and would have other times to admire his office. She cleared her throat. It's about the driver, yeah? What about him? I'm very thankful to you for being considerate enough to offer me a company car and driver. But I'm afraid I do not need the driver, Lucy said, taking the straightforward approach. You don't? And why is that? You don't like your driver? Did he do or say something wrong? Harry asked as he watched her with interest. No, he didn't. I'm just not comfortable with being driven around. I think I can manage well on my own, so if you don't mind, are you saying we should fire him? No. Of course not. I'm sure he needs the job, and I wouldn't be so mean as to deny him his means of livelihood because of my personal reservations, Lucy quickly explained. So if we can't fire him, what do you expect us to do with him? Assign him to someone else? Or fix him in a different position? She asked with a frown. Everyone else who needs a driver has one, and this is the only position he is qualified for. Then maybe someone might be willing to swap with me? Lucy asked without thinking. I thought the problem wasn't with him. Why are you asking for a swap? Oh. It's just. I'd be more comfortable with someone older, Lucy explained with an embarrassed smile.